Shalom, Hebrews and Hebrews. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Oilfield Disciple, and we are reading today out of 1 Samuel, my apologies, 1 Samuel, chapter 17, and we'll be in Acts chapter 12. I may have to break this video up into two video parts because that 1 Samuel chapter 17 seems like it's pretty long. So we'll see how it goes. May just be 1 Samuel, and then I'll do another one on Acts. Camera around. I just had to fire that guy up. It was 12 degrees when I left the house this morning, and I don't think that one liked it. It runs off of its own gas that it makes off the well. So something happened and it was dead. So figured it'd be a good place to do a video. 1 Samuel 17. And the Philistines had gathered their armies for battle and came together at Soka, which belongs to Yehudah, and encamped between Soka and Azekah and Ephes Damim. Okay. And Shaul and the men of Israel were gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah, and drew up in battle array to meet the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other, with the valley between them. And then a champion came out from the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath, from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. 6 cubits, I think it's like 9.5 feet, almost 10 feet tall. And a bronze helmet was on his head, and he was armed with scaled armor, and the weight of the coat, 5,000 shekels of bronze. And bronze shin guards on his legs, and a bronze spear between his shoulders. All that armor, when I went and did some word studies and searched that out, come out to be about 91 pounds of armor that Goliath had on. So that's just pretty hefty. And the wood of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and the iron, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels, and a shield bearer went before him. And he stood and shouted to the armies of Israel. Now I did the search on his spear too, and I think it was like 61 pounds, something like that. Don't quote me on that because I didn't write it down in my Bible for some reason. I wrote down the other. The cubit is about between 18 and 20 inches, depending on the person. And then the weight, I wrote that down. I don't know why I didn't write down his spear, because it was pretty massive too. I think it was like 60-some pounds. Anyway, verse 8. And he stood and shouted to the armies of Israel and said to them, why have you come out to line up for battle? I am not a Philistine, and you, the servants of Shaul? Choose a man for yourselves. Let him come to me. If he is able to fight with me and shall strike me, then we shall be your servants. But if I overcome him and shall strike him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. Then the Philistine said, this day I shall reproach the armies of Israel. Give me a man, and let us fight together. And Shaul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, and they were broken down in great fear. No faith in Yahweh whatsoever. That's right, we got a young kid coming up. He gonna handle it for you. But this Goliath, he's just standing out there taunting them, you know, and to save a whole bunch of people dying, a lot of times you would just champion two people together, and the champion that won, the other army would secede and commit to defeat to the other army and save a whole bunch of bloodshed. Now they're great fear. I mean, I don't blame them. I mean, you know, if you don't have faith in Yahweh, and you're working on your own power, yeah, you're going to see this behemoth of a man standing down there and look at everybody around and go, yeah, I don't care how skilled at battle you are, you're not beating that. Verse 12. Now David was the son of that Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Yehudah, whose name was Jesse. And he had 8 sons. And in the days of Shaul, the man was old among men. And 3 oldest sons of Jesse went, and then they had gone to follow Shaul to battle. And the names of the 3 sons who went to battle were Eliab, the firstborn, and the second Abinadab, and the third Shammah. And David was the youngest. And the 3 oldest followed Shaul. But David went and returned from Shaul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And for 40 days the Philistine drew near morning and evening, and took his stand. For 40 days. This dude standing out there taunting Israel, telling them their God sucks and how strong he is and how weak they are. That's amazing to me. Then Jesse said to his son David, please take your brothers an ephah of this dried grain and these 10 loaves, and run to your brothers at that camp, and take these 10 cheese to the commander of the 1,000, and see how your brothers are, and bring back news of them. And for Shaul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. And David rose up early in the morning and left his sheep with the herdsmen, and took and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the camp as the army was going out to fight, and they shouted for battle. And Israel and the Philistines drew up in battle array, army against them. And David left his supplies in the hand of the keeper of the supplies, and ran to the army, and came and greeted his brothers. And he was speaking with them, and saw the champion of the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up from the armies of the Philistines. And he spoke according to the same words, and David heard. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, ran from him, and were in great fear. And the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up? For he has come up to reproach Israel. And it shall be that the man who strikes him, the king, is going to enrich him with great riches, and give him his daughter, and give him his father's house, exemption in Israel, no taxes. And David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, what shall be done for the man who strikes this Philistine, and shall take away reproach from Israel? For who is the uncircumcised Philistine, that he should reproach the armies of the living Elohim? And the people answered him according to his word, saying, this is what is done for the man who strikes him. And Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men. And Eliab's displeasure burned against David. And he said, why did you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the evil of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. And David said, now what have I done? Was it not but a word? And he turned around from him toward another, and said the same word. And these people answered him a word like the first. And when the words which David spoke were heard, and they reported to him Shaul, and he sent for him. And David said to Shaul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant is going and shall fight with this Philistine. And Shaul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, and he a man of battle from his youth. And David said to Shaul, your servant has been tending sheep for his father, and when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I went after it. I struck it. I rescued it from its mouth, and when it rose against me, I took hold of it by its beard and struck it and killed it. David's like, I done fought lions and bears and wolves. I ain't scared of this dude. Because David knows he has God on his side. And your servant has stricken both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, seeing he has reproached the armies of the living Elohim. You don't dare come against my Yah. Me and Yah will go down there. Yah will supernaturally empower me, and I'll take him out, just like he did with the lions and the bears. And Shaul's like, man, this dude's been trained to fight. Not only is he trained in battle, look at him, he's monstrous. And you, a small youth. And David said, Yahweh, who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he'll deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Shaul said to David, go, and Yah be with you. Saul's like, fine, go, die. See, Shaul should be the one going down there. You know, you don't put your men in danger, ever. You're the leader. You became king for a reason. You get your ass down there and you fight this dude. But, you know, Saul's a coward. And Shaul dressed David with his garments, and he put bronze helmet on his head, and put a coat of armor on him, and David girded his sword over his garments, and began to go, but he had not tried them. And then David said to Shaul, I am not able to go with this, for I have not tried them. And so David took them off. You can just see David, the helmets are down over his eyes, and you know, the pads on his chest plate, everything just kind of weighing him down. He's just like, I can't even move with this. And David took his staff in his hand and chose for himself five smooth stones from the riverbed, and put them in the shepherd's bag, in a pouch, which he had, and his sling was in his hand. And he drew near to the Philistine, and the Philistine came and began drawing near to David. And the man who bore the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he despised him, for he was a youth, and ruddy, and of handsome appearance. And the Philistine said to David, Am I a dog, that you come to me with sticks? David's carrying a staff. That's it. And this Philistine is what do you call it? Offended. That about all your army, you send this little dude out here, I'm going to crush him. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I give your flesh to the birds of heaven and the beasts of the field. And David said to the Philistine, You come to me with the sword, with the spear, with the javelin. But I come to you in the name of Yahweh of hosts, the Elohim of the armies of Israel, whom you have reproached. So all I need, baby, is Yahweh. This day Yahweh shall deliver you into my hand, and I shall strike you and take your head from you, and give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines today to the birds of the heavens and wild beasts of the earth, so that all the earth know that Elohim is for Israel. Whew, David speaking words of power. And all this assembly know that Yahweh does save with the sword and spear, for the battle belongs to Yahweh. And he shall give you into our hands. And it came to be, when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, that David hurried and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David, not sure what that was about. And David put in his hand in his bag, and took out a stone and slung it, and struck the Philistine on his forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead. Yeah, let me see what's going on here. Stupid phone. So David took the sling, put the rock in there, and he smacked dude in the head. And Goliath fell on his face to the ground, and thus David was stronger than the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. And there was no sword in the hand of David. And David ran and stood over the Philistine, and took his sword, drew it from its sheath, and killed him, and cut off his head with it. And when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. Well, yeah, I mean, this little kid comes out there and wipes out David, or wipes out Goliath. Of course they're fleeing. Now who's scared? Now who's Yahweh you mocking? And the men of Israel and of Yehudah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines as far as the entrance of the valley and the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell along the way to Sha'araim, even as far as Gath and Ekron. Then the children of Israel turned back from chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their camps. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his weapons in his tent. David kept all of Goliath's weapons. And when Saul saw David going out against the Philistine, he said to Abner, the commander of the army, Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, As your being lives, O king, I do not know. And the king said, ask whose son this young man is. And when David returned from striking the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul, with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, whose son are you, young man? And David said, the son of your servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite. And thus David begins let's see, how would I say? David makes his mark on all history in the world. And every Bible school in Western culture is taught the story of David and Goliath. But they always use it, it's a little puny guy against a big tough guy. Not to be afraid of bullies and stuff like that. I see it as, if God is for me, who can be against me? Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to go out and say, stand down, President of the United States. I'm now the president. You got to be wise. David was wise. For 40 days, this man had mocked the camp in the army of Israel. David's like, why are we all scared of him? God has delivered us from all this. God has delivered me personally from lions and bears and tigers and wolves. I'll go do it. I ain't scared, because Yahweh's going to go before me. We'll let that be for today. Y'all be blessed, be encouraged, and always be frustrated. This oil-filled disciple, and we'll catch you on the next reading.